there's something else that I need to say about this Sound of Freedom film, which is that the tribal groups, you know, I felt so sorry for seeing them because it looked like there were a lot of slaves in this group. You know, it looked like the leaders were more of a kind of mafia and that they controlled the village, and the villagers had to basically just look up to this tribal group of this group of just savages basically. And you know, I got a feeling like a lot of maybe a few of the women in this group might have actually come into this group through being bought and purchased. You know, I think that's terrible. You know, especially if they, you know, I believe that the soul goes to parents who are similar. And if a child is sold, you know, at 6 or at a young age, you know, and gets put in a far worse situation, you know, where they're with people who are nothing like their parents or anything. You know, it is a very sad case because it's not fair on them. I'm sure though the people that sell the children might, um, I don't know, I don't know how, I don't know, I don't even want to say, I just I've looking at like how the villagers reacted, you know, it kind of it gave the impression that maybe a lot of them were sold into this group, and it's quite a sad thing. I think though, to comfort people is that if someone has gone through a huge amount of unfair abuse, the level of rewards, you know, karma has good and bad things. So the amount of good karma that they should deserve for being a slave and for going through suffering, you know, when they die, death will always be a death should be a comfort, knowing that if someone has gone through a really horrible, shitty time, you know, death death isn't, you know, death is an illusion. Death is an easy way out in some ways, you know. If people who are smart believe in reincarnation, they would feel that inside that that's the truth. Hence, if they're going through a really horrible time, you know, I've gone through a really horrible time, and death is pretty much now all I really want, because I know that in my next life I'm going to be in a better situation, better life, and I'm going to be rewarded for what I've done. Hopefully, whatever's going to happen around the corner is going to create a better world. The problem is, I think this world is so bad. Like, not talking about England here. I'm talking about, you know, these tribal groups. You know, you could feel sorry for them because they haven't had, you know, opportunities. And I'm sure if you did take some of these tribal kids and adopted them and gave them a better life, you know, my mum's living her first life as a human, and okay, I think she's stupid, but she doesn't listen to me. She doesn't respect my views. She doesn't believe that I could be Christ or God. But that's because she sees herself as being older than me. Hence, she's sort of bought into the human narrative, which is that the older you are, the smarter, which is true. But with reincarnation, someone who's, you know, living their 10th life as a 6-year old might actually be smarter than someone living their first life as a 50-year old, you know. So with reincarnation, it does merge. It makes things harder to tell the difference between who to listen to and who not to. And I think if there will be cases where people should have had a much better life, but are forced into this and forced to be a slave and slave and be a slave. But I feel like through their harshness, through their cruelty, you know, they would learn to feel compassion, feel love. You know, the people. It's interesting watching this film and seeing these dangerous tribes. You know, I don't. There's not that many films about dangerous tribes, and I think it's interesting watching it because I get an insight of what might be going on. You know, inside the minds. You know, I've seen tribes, and I think a lot of them from documentaries that I've seen where they go and meet these tribes. You know, these tribes seem like happy, normal people. Um, but if you ask them questions like, "Do you think murder is right or wrong?" You know, a lot of them might just be like, "Yeah, we think." You know, they'll say the wrong things. Okay, you could say that they believe the wrong things because they've been taught the wrong things. You've been taught by the wrong people, which is the kind of the case that it is. You know, if these people were brought up in better situations with better parents, that helped them tell the difference between what's right and wrong, they would be brought up very differently. But they haven't, and the reason why they haven't is just because there's way too many people, and there's these tribal groups that are living in sort of savage conditions, believing wrong things, and they're turning into the wrong kind of people because they are not being taught the right things. But yeah, there's not enough resources, and intelligent people who can create jobs to provide a good economy for everyone. There's companies are formed and run by people that generally know what they're doing. And if it's a successful company, it's because the leaders of that group know what they're doing and have managed to achieve stuff. And when we get too many tribes like this, it just shows that there aren't enough intelligent people who know how to make a business run and earn profit and stuff like this. I think that's why tax is so high, because there's a lot of people that don't know how to make money, hence they have to turn to the government. I understand it on some levels, it works and it's good. On the other hand, it's like, do we really want to be giving tax money to a lot of stuff that probably is actually unnecessary, when really these people should learn how to fund their own projects? But yeah, funding their own projects might mean that the projects doesn't actually take off the ground. So that there's good and bad in everything. The thing is, there needs to be enough intelligent people to help run the city, run the government. And in a lot of places around the world, it turns to corruption, it turns to greed and to control, and and to slavery. And to slavery will always be part of this. But through slavery, you learn things. um, and and I feel like if people didn't fear death as much, there'd probably be a lot less suffering. There'll be a lot less suffering because people would know that, like me, I'm going to have a better life next time. And if there are people that are forced into the worst of circumstances, you know, if they're said, you know, have sex with these 10 people, I'm going to shoot you in the head. I feel like it takes a lot of courage to just be like, actually, shoot me in the head, because that sounds like the better option. And you know what? Maybe it is the better option. If their life is going to just turn into such a horrible thing. But yeah, I also didn't say that the people who would sleep with a child probably do go on to just feeling like shit afterwards. They might think it's a good idea at the time, but they might end up like the guy in the film. He said that he slept with someone he thought was 25. I mean, she didn't look 25. He was thinking, oh, she's probably like 20 or 18, and it turned out she was 14. And he said that after that happened, he's completely turned his ways. He wanted to kill himself, and I'm sure there's lots of people who might find themselves in that situation, and really regretting it, and stuff. And yeah, I think everyone's core goal should be to be happy, and to learn how to be happy. Some people don't know how to be happy. You have to learn how to be happy, and some things you do, you think you'll get happiness, and then in a few years later you look back and just think, no, I was not happy. That's not happiness. What I'm doing now is so much better, and it's all progression. But yeah, I think if people learn to not fear death, then suffering would be far less. I think it'd be a shame if that girl would have killed herself, because she was actually going to be saved, if this story is a true story. I'm not too sure how true it is, and I'm not too sure on what she felt. They did make a statement at the beginning saying how many paedophiles they'd captured, um, being very proud of it, but also admitting that they've never actually saved any of the victims. And yeah, I think that does pose a question. What are these victims thinking? What are they going through? How are they feeling? What would their take on it be? Um, you know, if if there is pictures of a naked 6-year-old, but then but they let her go straight after, and she just lives a normal life, and then 4 years later she doesn't even remember it, um, or he doesn't even remember it. The damage on that person might not even be damage if they don't remember it, but the pictures can be, can go everywhere. But if they're not aware of it, then on some ways it feels it's not as bad, because they don't suffer from it. And I think suffering is the bad part. But yeah, um, I don't know any cases of child abuse. I think I've heard a couple of people say that they had done things by their parents, which is, it is awful, but at the same time, this, I believe the Holy Spirit has put people in certain circumstances because it's a reflection of what maybe they were like in their past life. But yeah, cases of kidnap and kids putting in completely unfair is even worse, because I feel like they maybe weren't meant to go through that, or maybe, but I'm sure my higher self has gone through the timeline and tried to. I think there's loads, there's only so many cases you can help, and if we're talking thousands, and I'm sure my higher self probably could make sure it's mildly fair or mildly justified, or that they're rewarded so much more in the next life. I mean, um, I think building a soul and a heart is very important. And that guy who would have by a 6-year-old, clearly has no soul. And then it kind of reminds me of Islam, and it's like, well, didn't their leader marry a 6-year-old? I mean, was that right? No. But yeah, people are still willing to worship a book that he wrote, and this world's messed up. That's all I can say.